Over the last few days, especially in the face of the situation with Haiti, the earthquake and the sudden love that's being demonstrated for African people by all kinds of cruel forces that have played a major role in depriving Haiti of the ability to even have a kind of infrastructure there that would have made this senseless death that we've witnessed impossible. I wondered how many people watching George W. Bush and William Jefferson Clinton standing with the mutt in Washington, D.C., declaring sympathy and interest in solving the problems of our people. I wondered how many people were taken in by that. And then, as I thought about it, I recognized that people get born into circumstances that give the impression of having always been like this. If they weren't around at a time when African giants in this country and throughout the world were trying to rescue us as a people, or certainly to provide us the kind of leadership that would allow us to rescue ourselves from these circumstances, perhaps what they saw appeared real to them. Perhaps they could imagine that the United States government and these former presidents of the United States were really interested in solving our problems. If they weren't around during the time that this government, so fragile, though it talks about how powerful it is, that it could not even tolerate criticisms coming from our communities that made it necessary for them to murder people like Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and Bobby Hutton, and more than 30 members of the Black Panther Party. If they weren't around when any of this happened, they may believe what they see happening, what people are telling them about wanting to help with Haiti. If they weren't there when, in the 1950s, after our people living in the most desperate kind of circumstances here and around the world, most of us sometimes are confused when we talk about the struggle of black people in the 1950s. We think of Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement, and we don't connect what was happening here in this country to what was happening throughout the world. Because the fact of the matter is that in the 1950s, we saw incredible movement led by peasants in Kenya, called the Kenyan Land Freedom Army, most popularly known as Mau Mau, who felt like African people should be in control of our own resources, who thought there was something terribly wrong to living there on the continent that's so wealthy, so rich on the one hand, and having these white interlopers, invaders, to have come, to have stolen the land and all the resources from the land and enslaved the people in colonialism. If they didn't know that Dedan Kimathi led an incredible movement to fight the Kenyans, to fight, rather, the British. And their slogan, as you know, was Uhuru, which is Swahili for freedom. and that they stood the entire British Empire, the British military forces, which was at that time one of the strongest military forces in the world. The British at that time controlled 1/4 of the population of the planet Earth. This barren rock, this handful of warlike people, control 1/4 of the people on the planet Earth, control 1/4 of the territory on Earth. And the Kenyans, under the leadership of Dedan Kimathi and the Kenyan Land Freedom Army, fought incredible courageous struggles to free ourselves. And they were a part of a movement of peoples around the world trying to free themselves from this white imperial domination. But most of us were ignorant of that. And certainly most of us are ignorant of it today. In fact, when you read about Mau Mau today, the idea that we get, and there were all kinds of movies made about Mau Mau. There was movies with Sidney Poitier and Rock Hudson, with Rock Hudson playing the noble, good white guy in Kenya, who grew up with a Kenyan who was colonized and was so betrayed when this African joined with these bloody killers who were the Mau Mau to kill the white people, who couldn't understand how his good friend was able to do that. And of course his good friend, played by Sidney Poitier, soon came to his senses when he saw how ruthless and bloody these black people were in striking out for their freedom. You know, most of us, if we know anything about that period, that's what we know. We know what has been told us about it by those who have imposed colonial and imperial domination on our lives. We don't know what was happening in places throughout Asia, how the Vietnamese people living under French domination, fighting to win control of their land, their territory. When we speak of domination, this is something that I think most often we are most unclear about, because we've been victimized by this politic of racism. And we've been convinced that people do things to us and treat us badly because for some reason they just don't like us, because we are black or some other thing like that. And while the reality is that a whole world economy that has brought the resources of everybody on the planet Earth to white people is what is involved. They have created a whole world economy. The wealth, we talk about England being this rock, this barren rock, inhabited by these warlike people who had nothing. And the way they accumulated was through warfare against other peoples. And that was generally true of Europe. That's why white people are in this place that we call the Americas today. Because Europe was barren and could not provide for them. So they struck out. And they came to these places that we call the Americas. That's why they're in Australia today. Not because things were so wonderful in Europe. If things were so wonderful in Europe, they never would have left. But they left Europe and they went to what we now call the Americas, and they call it their own. And they call the people who inhabited the land when they got here, if they still survive, they refer to them as things like illegals and aliens and what have you. They've created artificial borders that prevent people from coming to their own land that they have claimed as their own. How many black people did they murder in Australia? How many so-called Indians in Canada and here? This was the whole process of developing this world as we know it today. This is the process that got us here. This is the basis of the struggles that we see happening around the world today. When George W. Bush stands up and he says that the reason people are angry and the reason people are fighting us is because they are jealous, because we are good and they are evil. How many people believe that? How many Africans actually believe that is what is happening? Out of ignorance, out of not recognizing that the political and economic configuration of the world as it exists today was created through thuggery, through brigandage, through slavery, through colonialism, through terror. That has locked people into states of poverty so that in this world that we live in today, at least half the people on earth live off less than $2 a day. Not because white people are so much smarter than the rest of us, but because Europe struck out and enslaved the rest of us and stole our resources, and even today have in their possession our sovereignty in so many places. When we look at Hugo Chavez, we shouldn't be surprised when we see the people in Iraq and the people in Palestine and all these other places rising up. You can call it terrorism if you want to, but what is happening is that people are trying to rectify their relationship with white power and imperialism. That's what's going on. Nobody wants to live impoverished and starving, especially when it is our resources that's making somebody else rich. Here we are looking at Haiti. You hear the stories they tell us about Haiti, that things are so bad that the black people in Haiti, this the poorest, hopeless situation, we are told. I saw something just today that was telling us that how in Haiti the real problem is bad government and the lack of transparency in the government and all this stuff. And that how somehow they say, look at the difference in what we call Haiti and the Dominican Republic. They say, you look at Haiti, it's barren. Look at it from the sky, it's barren. Nothing is there. Look at Dominican Republic, it's green, etc. Things are wonderful. And they will allow us, they would have us believe that things are as they are for black people because of some ineptitude, some inherent ineptitude that possesses us, some pathology that is there. That's not to say even in Dominican Republic things are so wonderful as compared to what you find here and other places where white people live. But the basis of the comparison, you know what the basis of the comparison is. In part, complexion. People remember even during the Jomo, what's his name? I call him Jomo, the OJ. The OJ Simpson trial. When our enemies wanted to paint a picture of O.J. Simpson that would generate hatred and suspicion, do you remember how one of these news magazines took his picture and blackened it, darkened it so it looked darker than what he actually is? There's this assumption. Harry Reid's got it right when he said that O.J. might be able to be the president if he's light-skinned and doesn't speak with a Negro dialect except when he wants to. Make him black. And in Haiti, they too black, right? And so that's all you got to do to say that it's natural and normal what is happening to our people in Haiti. But the truth of the matter is this, that Haiti, Africans in Haiti, this tiny place, this small population, stood up against the French army, the best that Napoleon had, and Napoleon was supposed to have been the European military genius. But Haiti had the first successful workers' revolution in the world. The first successful slave revolt in the world, right there in Haiti, little tiny Haiti. And not only did they make that revolution, when the French came to try and chastise them, Haiti brought the French army to its knees. That's why they did the so-called Louisiana Purchase, how the French had to sell what they stolen from the indigenous people, right? Had to make a deal with the New Dawn, the United States, for the so-called Louisiana Purchase for $15 million, because they couldn't hang on out here anymore thanks to what Africans in Haiti had done to their military capacity. Wiped them out. Then what the Africans did in Haiti, they made a constitution that said that any place on earth, any slave, anywhere on earth, if you come to Haiti, you're free. That's what the Africans did there in Haiti. The ones that they taught us were savages and barbarians and what have you. So when Denmark Vesey in South Carolina, that was South Carolina he was located in, wasn't it? Charleston, Denmark Vesey in South Carolina, when he began to organize to try to make a revolution, he said, my brothers and sisters, join this movement. He said, if you join this movement, our brothers in Africa and our brothers in Haiti will come and join us in this struggle for our freedom. Haiti became the symbol for black people and oppressed peoples around the world. Haiti did. And so the French demanded that Haiti pay them reparations for taking their property, which was their black selves and the stuff that they had created on that land, where there used to be so-called Indians until the French, till the white people, I said the French, till the white people killed them and wiped them all out. And then not only did France do this, but all the European powers and the United States government got together and they did an economic quarantine of Haiti to force Haiti to pay reparations to white France. Haiti had fed France for 100 years. It was the richest island in the whole area. Haiti produced more wealth for white people than any of the others in the Caribbean. And they tell us that Haiti has to starve. But we fed France from there. And then all the European powers got together and starved Haiti, demanded that Haiti pay reparations, and for almost 100 years, Haiti, everything that was produced in Haiti went to pay France. They said, well, how is it that the black people in Haiti don't have anything? And then, of course, the United States government invaded Haiti. 1915, I think it was. 1914-15, the Marines went there. And they stayed there until around 1934. And while they were there, they tried to force the Haitians to change the Constitution. So that because the Constitution in Haiti prohibited the land in Haiti to be sold to anybody outside of Haiti. That's what the Constitution did. So they couldn't get the Africans to change the Constitution. They changed it themselves. So that the land in Haiti could be sold to foreigners who didn't live in Haiti, which means white people. Who else in the hell was running around buying the land? And then when they left in 1934, I think it was, Before leaving, they literally, this is not hyperbole here, they literally went and stole all the gold out of the treasury of Haiti and brought it here to the United States. And they don't know why Haiti is so poor. Who was there to help Haiti? Haiti, when they tried to make the revolution, Simon Bolivar, and the people in South America, when they tried to make revolution, Haiti assisted them. When the first African Indian president of Mexico, Guerrero, came to power, he looked to Haiti. He said, how can we fund an expedition by Africans from Haiti to strike out and free black people in Cuba? We've always been internationalists. We've always recognized ourselves as part of the same people, engaged in the same struggle. See, this is how things looked. But now there's this consciousness that does not recognize this history, assumes that everything has always been just like it is now. Just like it is now. Black people are supposed to be poor. Whoever heard of an idea where black people were not poor, where black people did not have ignorance imposed on our lives, where we were not constantly dealing with violence and what have you? It's normal. You see a lot of black people die, nobody's excited about it. You're supposed to die in great numbers. Anybody remember Jonestown? And all those Africans who died in Guyana didn't even bat an eye. You see masses of black people dead, you're supposed to die like that. And not only that, the ruling class white media will help you see it. To help everybody, remember, this is the way it's supposed to be for black people. Any kind of genocide, any kind of terror that you see happening on the African continent, they go there with all the cameras, let you see the bodies lying everywhere. That's the way it's supposed to be. They know that when you see that, it demoralizes you. And when white people see that, it makes them feel superior. So that in places where white people have died in great numbers, like in the Balkan areas, you didn't see all those dead white people everywhere. Not only because it demoralizes white people, because it might give you ideas. I'm told that when the Spanish came to the Americas, you know, Spanish are the minority of people who speak Spanish. You know that, don't you? Spain is a white place, right? Like the English are the minority of people who speak English. That's what colonialism and imperialism has done. But I'm told that when they first came to the Americas, that somehow, based on some legend that had existed among the indigenous peoples here, and let me back up first of all, because a lot of people have this notion about the Americas. You know, you go to the movies and you saw John Wayne or some other white person riding across the west of the plains, and you see 3 or 4 little teepees happening here. You get the impression was hardly nobody here when the white folks got here, right? But the truth of the matter is there were millions and millions and millions of indigenous people here when the white man got here. And that there were so many people in that they now call Mexico, right? What they now call Mexico. That right there, back in the 18th century, that there were at least 1 million people in what they now call Mexico. And not only were they not living in little huts and teepees and what have you, they had incredible cities, massive cities. And people talk about how they had actually built the city of Mexico, what they now call, was actually a city built on a lake. It was built on a lake. They talked about how beautiful it was with birds and what have you, just living in cities among the people and sometimes in the houses, you know? You know what I'm talking about. Somehow if you go to train station in Philadelphia and what have you. You might see a bird every now and then fly around. But these were parrots and wonderful, beautiful birds. It's a wonderful place. I'm not making this up. You can read this in some of the diaries of the conquistadors that they wrote during that time. They said, "I've never seen anything so beautiful as this." And then they set out and destroyed it all, wiped it out. And they've been characterized as civilized because they were able to do that. You see, because they came from a place in the world where nature was hostile, where it was hard to make it, where culture emerged of violence, of robbery, of thuggery, of stealing what you needed. And so in those places where war was going on all the time, they took things that the Chinese had used for thousands of years for celebrations and made guns and gunpowders and cannons with it. And as evidence of how much more civilized the white man was than the people who lived in the Americas, they say they didn't even have a gun. That is evidence of civilization, isn't it? If you got a gun, except if you're in the black community, right, and got a bunch of guns, that shows us how uncivilized you are, right? But I'm told that there was this legend that this God would look white or something like this, and so the white man got to jump on some people because of how they looked, and also because if they got within breathing distance, a lot of people fell dead. You know, that's a literal truth. I'm not making this up. That the indigenous people, they had no defenses for the germs that came with white people, right? And one of these days we're going to figure out that part of the reason for the difference in the lifespan of black people and white people might have something to do with proximity. But that's another story. That's another story. But I'm told that they were thought to be gods. And there was this one so-called Indian who caught one of them by himself, right? And took his knife and stabbed him several times. And then sat there for 3 days to see if he was going to do anything after that, right? On the third day, they said, no, this ain't no God. We can deal with these guys, right? We can deal with these guys. And the problem is that too many black people today still see the white man as a god. And they want you to see them as gods. And that's why they show on television the terrible things that happen to you. They show your dead bodies. They show your withered breasts. They show all these horrible things happen to you so that you continue to be demoralized and white people can continue to feel superior, but they don't show their dead bodies in such a fashion because it might give you ideas. It might not take you 3 days. Right? Yeah. So we've got confusion because what is happening in the world today, you just walked into the movie. You weren't there from the beginning. You see somebody chasing the little scrawny white guy. You see 5 tough black guys. You see 3 Arabs, 400 Arabs and what have you, chasing the little scrawny white guy and doing terrible things to him. You say, my, why would they do such terrible things to the little scrawny white guy? You just came in the middle of the movie. You didn't see what happened in the first frame, right? You didn't see that this little scrawny white guy was there with a crew of millions who had done the worst kinds of things that had created a situation that will deny the people the right to live. That's how it is. People get born in the middle of the movie. You don't get born when the movie starts. You're in the middle of the movie. That's when people got born. And so they don't have the benefit of an understanding of how things got to be the way they were, the way they are. They can even be convinced, as I was convinced in my youth, that black people and white people have these different conditions of existence because white people are more civilized than black people are. That somehow we have a deficit of civilization. That we have no culture. That if it weren't for the white man, we'd still be running around naked in Africa or something to that effect. Thank God for slavery. If you don't know that, you even believe in the concept of good slave masters versus bad slave masters. If you don't know the history, if you don't know the nature of the social system, if you don't know the nature of the United States government itself, born on stolen land, the people who were the original custodians, of course, have been either wiped out or those who remain are living in concentration camps that they call reservations even today. Wealth created by captive people whose homeland was attacked. Yes, it was. You might tell me my homeland was attacked on 9/11. Hell. Now you're talking about homeland defense. Isn't that something? And so it is our resources, our land, our wealth, our genius. You want to know part of the reason Africa is in the shape it's in today? Is because when they went to Africa, this sister here knows, this historian knows, one of the things they did was they went to the places where we grew rice. We were the best rice growers. We produced enough food to take care of ourselves, and they kidnapped us and they brought us here. They took us to the Carolinas and other places not to grow rice for black people, but to grow rice for them. The labor that we might have used that would have developed our Africa has gone to develop a world for white power and white people. That is the reality. And so people everywhere have been engaged in trying to change that. Some people say, well, it's all right now because used to be slavery, right? Used to be slaves, and somehow our history started in a cotton patch in Mississippi. You understand? That somehow, you're so much better off today than you were yesterday because you used to be on a cotton plantation in Mississippi or Alabama or something like that. Our history didn't start in the damn cotton patch. Don't tell me something about how much better off I am today because I am no longer enslaved under those circumstances. Talk to me about how much better off I am, not because of that, but because I am now free like I was when you met me. And when you met me, I didn't have to worry about working or doing any damn thing for you. That's the measurement of freedom, not some place from slavery to now, but from the real freedom that we had on the continent of Mother Africa before we met your white ass. That's freedom, that's freedom. They say, well, okay, no slavery now, right? No slavery, no segregation. Look how much better off. You're no longer segregated now. Look how much better off you are. And we're saying that the contradiction, the problem, is not whether you're segregated or not. Even slavery as such was not the problem. The problem is somebody has stolen our right to be a self-determining people. Have we reattained that right? Did we reattain that right at the end of slavery? Did we reattain that right with the passage of a civil rights bill? No, 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 no. You can't sit in your way back to self-determination. You can't vote in your way back to self-determination. And because we don't understand the nature of this government, we can be confused. A white liberal who plays the saxophone is now called the first black president. Isn't that something? The Negroes from Arkansas and now some of the same people who were calling him the first black president are now saluting this other Negro who they call the first black president. No, what you got in the White House now is the Whoopi Goldberg of American politics. By that, what I mean is, he's black in face just like Whoopi, right? But I don't know no black people who go to watch Whoopi Goldberg in the movie. Whoopi Goldberg is a movie star, a black star for white people. And Barack Hussein Obama is a black man who is in the presidency for white people, white power. Oh yeah. So, people don't understand that. People just a few years ago, people who are just like you, incredibly courageous and thoughtful people with principle, people who want to stand up for the dignity of our folk. They set out all around this country to organize for our freedom. They went into some of the most dangerous places in the world just to try to make it possible for somebody to register to join the Democratic Party. And they were murdered as a consequence of that. Whole movements were born. That's where the Black Panther Party came from. Black Panther Party took its name from the Lowndes County Freedom Organization that was built in Lowndes County, Alabama by Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and other civil rights activists who were just trying to use the electoral process to be free. That's where Huey Newton got the idea. That's where they got the symbol, because the symbol of the Lowndes County Freedom Organization in Alabama was the Black Panther. Houston, that's where People's Party number 2, led by Carl Hampton in Houston, Texas, who was executed and murdered. There in Houston, that's where these ideas came from. Just wanted to be free. Just people who are struggling to get back the happiness and stolen resources of our folk. That's all it was about. But this movement became so powerful. People had turned our back on the United States government. Couldn't tell us nothing. Turned our back on the Democratic Party. Created our own organization. That's what the Black Panther Party was about. And other organizations. We had created our own political parties. And had defeated the United States government both politically and ideologically. That's why we were talking about black power. We need our own black power, not white power, black power. And they understood that you can't have a power that's shared with somebody else. It's an illusion. Either you got the power or they got the power. Understand? And so movements were born, and people, courageous people, young people, struck out. They murdered Malcolm X because that was what he was trying to teach us all along. But they killed him too late. Because by that time, the ideology, the philosophy, the understanding had impacted African people all around the world, and especially throughout this country. And so we saw this incredible movement that shook this empire to its foundation. And the black movement has always had that potential because it is the foundation upon which the entire American empire rests. Black people, the enslavement and colonization of black people is the foundation that the entire thing rests upon. It is we who built the political economy of this country. It is we who provided America the excuse to be able to hold in line the white population and to give the white population some illusion of its superiority
It was we who they could always look down on and therefore never have to look up and see their own government that's responsible for so much misery of the world. We've been a critical component. It is we who provided them with the ideological underpinning of a whole system that people call racism. Not just here, the whole world, the whole capitalist, the whole empire rests upon this ideological foundation of racism, the assumption of the superiority of white people and the inferiority of the rest of us. Blacker you are, the more inferior you are. Create this magnificent division between the people that exists now on the island of Hispaniola. The difference between Africans in Haiti and Africans in Dominican Republic. You see? Illusion. Grew up with it here. I remember the light skin, curly hair. Curly hair was what kind of hair? Good hair, right? Oh yeah. Ain't that something? Here you come from Africa, right? Your relationship with nature requires you to be black. Thank goodness. Requires your hair to have muscles. Thank goodness. And somebody who's got hair that looks like Lassie has good hair. Isn't that extraordinary? And of course they had us, didn't we? Didn't they have us? They made a lot of money off us, didn't they? Oh yeah. They made a lot of money. And Michael Jackson became the poster child. And I like Michael with his little confused self. Talented, confused. But don't knock Michael now. Because you're going to have to go back home and look at your neighbors and relatives. You talk about confusion. Look at African people. That's the starting point of this discussion, the confusion of our folk. Right? We've been had. As Malcolm said, you've been had, you've been took, you've been misled. Indeed. So, this is the world that's been created for us, and this is the world that everybody's trying to break out of now. That's what they're doing in Palestine. That's what they're doing in Iraq. I don't live this way. I don't care who you are. Be as white as you want to be. If you bring yourself here to try to take our oil and take our sovereignty, we will blow you up. At least we'll do that to you. At least. At least. And if the knife sharpener is around, we might behead you. People want their freedom. And I don't give a damn whether you like the tactics they use or not, because I disagree with some of the tactics, but the issue is they got a right to fight for their freedom. And when they ask me about whether or not I like or dislike the tactics being used by somebody in Afghanistan or somebody in Iraq, I tell you the problem I got tactically is with those white people as the United States government, with those forces who occupied that land and are trying to keep those people living under oppression. That's the tactical problem I got. That's the starting point of any discussion. That's the starting point of the problem. Don't tell me Saddam Hussein was a bad man. What the hell? If we're going to deal with bad men, we dig up George Washington. You understand? At least Thomas Jefferson, a baby raping slave owner, raped that child when she was 13 years old. And then at first the white people want to act like it didn't happen. No, he didn't do that. Oh yes, he did. He did it. And then when they finally have to admit it, DNA test proves it, right? Then they're going to say, now they refer to it as a woman that he had an affair with. How the hell does a slave master have an affair with a slave? How in the hell does that work? Can she say, not tonight, honey, I got a headache? No, it doesn't work like that. Doesn't work like that. So this is the world, and people are struggling to get out of it. In this country, we had incredible men and women. When I came in on yesterday prior to the banquet, I saw a photo on the slide projector of one of those women, Asada Shakur. You know, bad sister, courageous black woman, courageous African woman, courageous African soldier, courageous African resistor, courageous African revolutionary, right? Yeah, we want to live like Asada. We want to live like Asada. And when you live like Asada, what you do is that you put your stakes in the future. You bet on the people. You bet on freedom. I know that our people will be free. Part of the reason I know that our people will be free is because what I'm going to do to help make it happen. Because what I'm going to do to help make it happen. Right? So that's what was so magnificent. Asada, Sundiata Acoli, all these revolutionaries. We got all these political prisoners locked up right now behind bars. All they wanted to do was to struggle for our happiness and the return of our resources. That's all they did. You can't be no self-interested person to go up against the empire like this. You're going up against the greatest power, military power that the world has ever seen. You ain't got no jets. You don't have all those resources, you see, but you fight them in the housing projects. You fight them everywhere you can. That's not somebody who's self-serving. That's somebody who has a real love for our people and for freedom. And they don't need to be in no damn prisons, and they don't need to be living like fugitives, hiding from American secret police in Cuba or any other place in the world. So new world is happening. The empire is on crutches. The empire is on crutches. It's simply limping along. Everybody in the world can see that. We just don't see it too clearly as Africans yet. Hugo Chavez sees it. In Venezuela, Ahmad in Iran, he sees it. Ahmadinejad, he sees it. Peoples around the world see this sucker's on crutches. And you know why he's on crutches? Not because of anything the mythological white working people have done, working class, right? But because the whole capitalist edifice rests upon the enslavement and colonization of the vast majority of the peoples of the world, and people have risen up to take back our resources. And you ain't going to be able to put this genie back in the bottle. You ain't going to be able to stop this thing that's happening everywhere. Ain't enough white people left to do that. You don't have enough guns and tanks and bombs to do that. See, people have decided we're not going to live like this anymore. And so that's what's so significant about this time, this place in history. That's why Iraq is happening. That's why Afghanistan and Pakistan, everywhere you look, and now they're talking about Yemen, everywhere you look, Nigeria, they're finding somebody that they got to call a terrorist because somebody somewhere, everywhere, is trying to plot a way to get Uncle Sam off of our back. So, we believe in freedom. APDEP is an opportunity for people who want to change our circumstances. You might not even be interested in being a revolutionary, but APDEP is a revolutionary project, whether you are revolutionary or not. And the African People's Socialist Party that created this organization, we're a revolutionary organization. Because in the final analysis, there are a lot of black people who are busy all around the world, political prisoners, they're busy with that, busy with this, but busy for reparations, but toward what ends? Is all this work going toward what ends? We ain't no United Nations charity thing. We ain't no NGO. There's not enough. We don't have enough resources. Look at what they're doing in Haiti to make a good show. They're taking tons and tons and tons of stuff. But guess what? When they leave, Haiti will still be enslaved. So our objective is not to try to outdo them there, but to build a capacity and a working relationship organizationally, organically between black people all around the world, saying that we can get ourselves out of this situation. Everywhere, all around the world. This is no abstract idea. This is practice. This is a practical reality. There are rainwater harvesting programs right now in Sierra Leone as a consequence of what you have done. There is going to be launching of this boat in Elosera so that the people can contend, at least minimally, with the corporations that's overfishing off their shores beyond their capacity right now. You are the ones who make this responsible. You are the ones who are looking into dealing with the infant and maternal mortality situation there. Not for charity, not to find a way for white women to come and adopt our babies and act like they've done us some favor as a consequence of that. Not to strengthen some NGO or strengthen the United Nations in relationship to us, but we're doing this with organizations on the ground who have as an interest and an intent to overturn their relationship with imperialism altogether. We are moving in a way with this organization that will tie in with other African organizations on the ground, whether in Haiti, whether in Africa, whether right here in New Orleans or any place else. We are working with them so that they become stronger in their contest with the oppressive governments that they have to contend with where they are. That's the objective. And it's a dynamic relationship. It's a way to pool all our resources, because they have impoverished us because stealing our resources. But we are only poor as individuals. As individuals, we are poor, but Marcus Garvey showed us the way. Because Marcus Garvey, Africans put their nickels and dimes and pennies together and bought a damn steamship line. If they could do that in 1920, why can't we do something in 2010? This is the significance of APDEP. This is no lame Pan-Africanism where everybody got their own little thing over there and you a Pan-Africanist because that's what you call yourself. Right? This is African internationalism at work. African internationalism is different because part of this theory requires action, requires practice, requires doing something, And that is APDEP. I don't want to meet another Negro Pan-Africanist that's, what they do every year, they bring Garvey out and dust him off and make speeches and then put him away. And he dead now, he can't say nothing about it, you understand? They do this to all these magnificent leaders and whatever, but the thing is not to bring Garvey out, but to live like him, to build the organization that can free us. And that's what APDEP is. That's what APDEP is. It's a living, organic process that unites African people. There's no litmus test except that you want to be involved in a movement that connects with your brothers and sisters everywhere that can change our circumstances. There's no litmus test except that you're tired of simply giving your talents, your skills to help imperialism at the expense of our freedom and our people. That's the litmus test, that I love black people. I want black people to be free. I know black people should be free. I know that as much as we've done for this world, it's about time for us to be able to enjoy the fruits of our own labor. Uhuru. E Africa. One Africa. One